Okay, this confession stopped me dead in my tracks. I found it so interesting. But also, when I tell you there is an entire community talking about this subject online, I think you're going to be fascinated and surprised. I am Laurie March, and this is True Home Confessions, the show where we take calls and emails from people who want to tell us a little bit of something that's going on at home. And we do our very best to try to offer some solutions, good or bad. So let's take a listen, and we'll hear today's confession.
I can't believe I'm telling you this, but in the pandemic, I started buying 1 or 2 houseplants because I was so depressed. A few months later, and I feel like a total superstar because I've kept them all alive. I love the look of plants everywhere. It's so relaxing. But plants are so expensive, and I want them everywhere. So I started going to stores like Lowe's and our garden store and, picking up little succulent leaves or broken branches that fell off. They were on the ground. Then I broke up a branch one time and just stuck it in my pocket and hid it on the way out. It's totally one of my favorite plants now, thriving from that one little piece. But I do feel a little bad about that. It's not like I stole the plant. It still looks great and it's totally okay to sell. Plus, it's literally Walmart. It feels more moral to take something from them. They're making a killing. Now when I walk around the plant store, I'm aggressively on the hunt for these little babies that I can take home and take care of. Once I even brought my own pair of scissors and cut a few little branches. When I mentioned what I've been doing to my boyfriend, he totally said it's stealing and looked at me funny when I argued with him. Please tell me you get it. It's just a branch.
Ooh, the tea is hot today. As you all may know, True Home Confessions asks, are our friends really equipped to help us deal with our toughest problems? Today's friend of the show is Ryan Barton, Upright Citizens Brigade, Main Stage performer and comedy writer, man about town. I cannot wait to hear your take on this one.
This one is so juicy. This one is so good. I find myself immediately relating to this person or wanting to protect this person. Because at the very end of it, and I guess this person has a partner and who did not approve of this behavior. My one question is this hurting anyone? Is it hurting anyone? Is it hurting anyone's wallets? I don't think so. Is it hurting anyone at home? I don't think so. Is it hurting the plant? Maybe. But the plant gets to go farther than it ever would sitting on a shelf at Walmart. So my first thought is I love it. I am rooting for this person. I find this charming. I find this very cute. And those are my first impressions.
Sure.
What are your first impressions?
I feel like we covered some ground here, right?
We did, yes.
Because I think it is so relatable that in the pandemic, people adopted plants. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of house plants, and there are more now after pandemic. And I think it just became, we were at home petting our plants and talking to them and trying to create serotonin. And so I get it. Plants are good for air quality. They're just wonderful. We started there, mm-hmm. and then it sounded like this fellow identified that when you pick up some types of he said succulent leaves, right? Mm-hmm. So succulents propagate from a little leaf. The next little plant grows. So I think he clued into the fact that having those little succulent leaves can generate a whole new plant. Mm-hmm. It takes a while, by the way. This is not a overnight process.
Right.
But so he walked around and started picking up leaves first, which is a starting place.
Uh-huh.
But then I feel like we jumped to this person put a branch in their pocket. like nipped a little branchy and tucked a branch in their pocket and walked out with it.
Behavior wise, that's weird. We can say it. That's weird. Like I imagine this person, sunglasses, hoodie up, and just a little scissor comes out of the sleeve and just snips a little, then slowly goes back in. And I find this chaotic good, right? Like if we're on the grid,
right.
This is to me feels like chaotic good because it's, again, I'm like, okay, interesting. Now the behavior itself is really funny to me. Like it's like just so specific where I'm like, oh, it does make me wonder what's the next level, right? Are we just taking a little plant underneath the...
Well, I kind of felt like we hit the next level the second the scissors came out because this is not something that's on the ground. If it's on the ground in a broken branch, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like that's sort of
we agree. We're not upset about that, right?
No, I'm not upset about that.
Okay.
As soon as the scissors came out, it's a deliberate action in my brain, like premeditated, I guess, because you came into the store with scissors, right? And walked out. The other thing that rung my bell was this person said that they put it in their pocket. They hid it.
Yes.
Like they did not walk out with that branch.
Right.
So perhaps in that they knew that what they were doing was a little bit shady, right?
Yes.
Or like questionable. So I don't know, my brain, like there is a slope here. Where do you go next from this? Right?
Right. Well, that's my question. I'm like, what's the next level here?
I know what it is. Okay. One time I was walking, actually I was headed to a comedy club, walking down Melrose, and there was this cute gal in front of me and like boots and a skirt, and we're walking by, I forget what the store was. There's a bunch of gorgeous, huge, tall cactuses out front. And somebody had put in a couple of smaller ones, like something you might get at the flower market downtown, like little ones, kind of all along the edges. I literally watched this girl dig it out of the ground and walk away with it. I feel like that's the next step.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Why do I hate that?
It was gross.
Yeah. And were these already planted there?
It was planted.
Or these? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that is the natural progression.
But why do we hate her and we don't hate him?
Because, okay, so here's the thing. To me, I think a huge part of the question was, and I feel this way, corporations deserve nothing. They aren't, and I think it's very justified, and this is where I am on the end of the spectrum, where I'm like, you know what? You want to steal a little? Go out there and steal a little. I don't care. Because these people, they're not affected by it. I genuinely don't believe they are affected by anyone stealing from them.
Yeah. So you're saying Walmart or Lowe's or whatever big box store isn't going to feel it.
Right. Yeah. I don't think they're going to feel it on the top line. I don't think they're going to feel it on the bottom line.
Right.
So therefore, however, I actually think it would be really impressive if you could steal a plant out of one of these stores. Very difficult, I think. All the soil. The soil. It may not be a blood trail, but that'll be a soil trail.
The cactus was wild because it was a pokey little thing. And when she dug it out of the ground, I was also like, what is your end game? Like, how you gonna...
Yeah. And I guess the thing that I feel... So I'm from Arizona. I'm from the desert. So maybe I have a little more of a relationship with cacti. I'm assuming it's probably like a barrel cactus if it was like a little one that's easy to be dug up like that. But I'm like... I don't know. They feel like very exotic and rare and like should be protected in my head.
Sounds like you, do you approve or disapprove of this behavior?
I absolutely approve of it.
Okay.
I enforce it.
Okay.
I think this is, again, really cute, really endearing, as long as it's not hurting anyone. And if it just stays here, I'm like, that's fine. And like, honestly, what if that person eventually ends up buying like a plant from, I'm like, it's all justified to me.
Have you ever stolen anything? I'm going to put you on the spot, Ryan Barton.
Do you know what's so funny? I hadn't ever stolen anything until during the pandemic.
Okay.
And I think it was just like a way for me to be like, I think, and it's like nothing major, but just like, you know, what if I just steal a little thing here or there? No one's going to notice. The pandemic was chaos.
Yeah.
And honestly, I kind of was like, this is just like a fun little survival thing. Like, I'm like, I'll just take a little here and there. And you know what? Again, like, I don't think I ever felt bad because it's like I'm stealing from, I would never, ever steal from like a mom and pop shop or something. And you know what? This is just to show you how crazy my spectrum is. I was at a restaurant the other day and God, I love their spoons. Like their spoon, it was such a sexy spoon. And I had never, ever thought to steal from a restaurant ever. But like I have friends that do, but I'm like, you know what? I really want this spoon. And I don't think I'll ever be back here. And like,
Did you take the spoon?
You know, I didn't because it just was like, it was very Billie Eilish's What Was I Made For?
Yeah.
Kind of the song started playing. And I'm just like, am I going to steal this? No. Have you ever stolen anything?
Oh my God. I thought about this before this episode, and this is going to sound so lame, but yes, the thing that I have stolen in the past is I am a coffee drinker. I love coffee.
Okay.
My best friend comes over my house all the time and drinks coffee, and I don't take sugar.
Sure.
I just coffee and like milk, whatever,
Okay.
almond, coconut. My best friend takes sugar in her coffee, and I never have what I need for her, and I feel like a jerk. So when I go to a coffee shop and I get a coffee, I look at the little thing next to me, and I am definitely taking home her sugar.
Yeah, but Lori, that's not stealing.
What? But I didn't use it in my coffee. Isn't that kind of? I mean, I put it in my purse and walked away with it.
Lori, that's not stealing.
What?
You went in, you purchased a coffee.
Yes.
And they have complimentary sugars for people who purchase coffee.
But I bought the coffee and I took the sugar that I didn't put in my coffee and I stuck it in my purse and went home with it so that my best friend had it the next time she came over, which she was really grateful for, but it didn't go into my coffee that day.
Lori, I have no idea what you're explaining, but I know that it's not stealing.
Okay.
Stealing would be if you maybe you went to go get your coffee and then you took someone else's coffee who was also like waiting. Like that is stealing.
Okay.
But a complimentary, yeah.
I feel like after this episode goes out, I'm super curious because I feel obviously I feel a little bit bad about it, or I wouldn't have brought it up. But
yeah, that is very funny to me.
Okay.
And just goes to show what a kind, clean soul you have, Lori.
What I heard you say earlier too was that the mom and pop made a difference to you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Because I feel like it would affect them in some way. It would like hurt their business in some way. And I think mom and pops are very curated, you know, from the top down. Someone, specifically the owners, probably have had to think about what they are purchasing, you know, what money they can make on certain items. I don't know, like all of that I take into consideration. And I think if we've learned anything post-pandemic about corporations, it's a penny. It's a penny weighed to whatever. And like this person's not even stealing the plant, you know, they're not even taking the plant out. Right.
I could talk to you forever about this.
Yeah.
This is eternally
it's a juicy subject.
It sounded a little bit like his partner thought he was stealing.
Right.
And like, that's kind of that's a thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like, Lori, if you and I were partners, we would be this couple.
Yeah.
So what would you, I guess, I'll speak for the questioner.
Okay.
You speak for the questioner's partner.
Great.
Where do we go from here?
Maybe I need to come with you to the store and really witness this act and see if it feels like stealing or not.
Oh, I love that. That feels supportive.
Yeah.
And then
Yes,
when you
and.
come home, and when you come home and I grow a gorgeous plant in our home and you see the whole process, maybe you'll be more like, okay, that doesn't seem as bad.
Yeah. Or maybe when we go to the store, if I see you cutting something off a plant and it feels weird to me, maybe you don't do it and we go buy a plant instead. Maybe I go buy you a plant.
That's, yeah, with your money,
Yeah.
you buy me a plant.
Okay.
That feels, honestly, that is a happy solution. It doesn't scratch the itch, though, that I've now formed
Right.
of needing to steal and hoard little crumbs of plants.
Right.
And take forcefully for myself.
It's going to be the slowest jungle ever built, by the way, from little branches to a household jungle.
Totally.
For any of us who have houseplants, you know how long it takes for them to grow. Thank you so much. This has been freaking riveting.
No problem. Thank you so much, Lori, for having me.
Yay, so fun. This episode is brought to you by Renewal by Andersen. As a brand ambassador, I gotta tell you, I love this company. The people who work here are genuinely wonderful. I get it. Buying windows and doors is not the most exciting home improvement project. But when you go with a high quality brand, you get expert level peace of mind. If you need an upgrade, here's an offer. Buy one window or door, get one 40% off. Plus an additional $200 off if you buy 4 or more. Special financing is available. Are you in? Give Renewal by Andersen a call at 844-290-2458. Tell them I sent you. Next up, we're going to talk about that confession and explore the friendly advice that we got from Ryan Barton with our expert. While I've got him, I have a few other questions too. Today, we're talking with self-taught gardener, author, seed company owner, and founder and CEO of Epic Gardening, Kevin Espiritu.
What's going on?
Hello. Epic Gardening has over 10 million social media followers, 21 million podcast downloads. I think it's safe to say that you are the internet's plant daddy.
Hey, it's a self-coined nickname, but I will take it.
I love it. It's so good. Through Epic Gardening, you have been making garden videos for over 11 years. It sounds like 1,000 videos or more, 2,000 podcast episodes, some of them daily. Kevin, I am tired just thinking about that.
Yeah, it's been a long journey for sure. Many seasons and hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, like a huge body of work. It feels like a major transformation from, I have been following you for a while, and from your very first plant to today, growing something cute and charming to seed company owner and CEO of a kind of an empire at this point, Kevin. 80 people, it sounds like you've got. I mean, growing stuff seems like it's in your DNA.
At this point, yeah, but I didn't grow up as a gardener. I was like kind of a nerdy, sciencey, computer-y kid and got into it in my 20s. But yeah, I would say it's in my DNA now.
I feel like that's like a sciencey, nerdy background can be such really good raw materials for a love of gardening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can engage with it in so many different ways, but to me, that's the way that it hooked me was how does the plant actually grow? Like what's causing the tomato to ripen, or why does transplanting work, or all these different, pieces of the gardening puzzle. It's just fun to solve.
I love that. Kevin, our confessor called in to share that he had also fallen in love with plants, specifically houseplants, over the pandemic, which I know we both can relate to. And he had adopted some new methods for bringing home little plant babies into the house, including picking up broken branches, as well as snipping things off at the store with scissors for his own home jungle. What are your thoughts on that?
So I did listen to the comedic guest, let's say, and I was with you guys for the first bit where, we actually have a term in the gardening world. We call this prop lifting instead of shoplifting. Prop lifting is what they call it. And you'll see people go to a Home Depot or a Lowe's or one of these big box stores, which traditionally, they don't take amazing care sometimes of the stuff in the garden center. So there might be a sprig of basil on the ground or in succulents. I know the caller mentioned succulents. Those are really easy to fall off. Those like sort of thick petals, someone brushes by them, they're on the ground. I don't have a problem personally with someone who wants to grow out a tiny little succulent that fell on the ground, just one petal. Like you mentioned, Lori, it takes quite some time for that to turn into a plant. It's sort of an exercise in patience. There's no way that the business could have actually sold that small, tiny piece. It would have been complete waste. And so that's sort of like a rescue, in my opinion. But I do think when the caller starts bringing scissors or bringing pruners and snipping active plants, like to me, that is theft. I mean, I don't know how you get around the fact that that's theft. I think it just legally is. And I would agree then with that person's partner. And I would say that to me was the step too far. If you're taking cuttings off the ground that no one would have done anyways, not a big deal. I mean, there's also, this happens, Lori, in home gardens or, ornamental gardens where people will just be walking by and they'll take cuttings of stuff from your garden that you didn't obviously give them permission to do. And a lot of the times it's pretty harmless and no big deal. But sometimes people will just cut a significant portion of a plant off and just be like, well, who cares? It's just a plant. It doesn't matter. It's like, it's weird that we think of it in that fashion because obviously we put a lot of time into growing our plants. And so if someone comes and snipes off the top of your tomato or whatever because they want to grow a cutting from it, that's not a great move.
Right. I agree. Friend of the show, Ryan Barton said, is this hurting anyone? Is it hurting anyone's wallet? I don't think so. Is it hurting anyone at home? I don't think so. Is it hurting the plant? Maybe.
So how deep should I go on this one? Because I actually don't agree. And I could go pretty deep if you want me to.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately here on True Home Confessions, we're asking, is this advice good? Is it worth following? So if you
Yeah.
already have an answer to that, Kevin, I'm
Well,
ready for it.
yes, I mean, I think the advice of don't steal is pretty good, pretty solid advice to go by. But okay, so let's take the example because it seems like Ryan was differentiating between like a mom and pop and a big corporation, right?
Yep.
So, well, mom and pop, I understand that impulse because you would walk into the store and there's the mom and the pop, and you'd be saying right in front of their faces, I'm just going to kind of take your livelihood from you by stealing, I don't know, a piece of a juniper or something like that and trying to root it. I get that it seems more cut and dry. And then when you get into like the bigger corporation thing, you say, is it such a big deal? Who's being harmed? I find that to be kind of like the argument of like, well, if I'm littering, who cares? Because it's just one piece of trash. Obviously, in a population, there's a lot of people, right? And if everyone thinks to some degree that way, it actually adds up significantly. So this is a wild stat. At Lowe's in 2022, shoplifting or employee theft cost the company $1 billion.
My God.
1 billion, right? And so, but who is the company made up of? Like, what is a corporation, right? Well, it's a structure. It's like a legal structure, and then people are in it, right? And it serves people on every part of the inside or outside of the company. So the employees get paid, right? The customers pay the corporation for the services, but then it's a public company, right? So it's
Right.
being invested in by who? Us, right? There's pension funds that invest in it. All of our retirement plans are invested in these companies. So if we're all stealing from a company, we're actually depressing the value of that company for ourselves and like maybe the retirement plan or the Arizona firefighters fund who has a pension plan in that. Now that's like pretty far removed. I get that as well, but if you think about it, like that 1 billion in it's called shrinkage, right? So shoplifting.
Right.
And this is like way more severe type of shoplifting probably than like taking a piece of a plant.
Hmm.
But he did say it's not hurting anyone. So, okay, so get this. Lowe's made 11.9 billion in like net income or EBITDA is called, but 6.4 billion net income. So a billion in shoplifting is like almost 10% of that, right? So it's not just like the top line, it's the bottom line. So what could they do with the billion if it didn't get stolen? Well, they could probably build like more stores, they could hire more people, give more people jobs, they could probably reinvest it in a better way than just not having it, right? So they could
Hmm.
maybe create better products or something, and then that person could they could then offer that to people and they make more money and then your stock goes up, whatever. So there's like a lot of different things that money could have been repurposed for the benefit of actual human beings, not just the corporation. But I understand the impulse of like, hey, it's this big evil corp. Like, who cares about it?
Right.
It doesn't matter. I guess like what I always get confused by, and I'm someone who I had a little small bootstrapped company, and now we do have 80 to 100 people. You could almost say we're getting to the point where someone could say, well, who cares? It's just a big company. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, what if 10% of our revenue gets stolen, right? For
Right.
some reason or another.
Yep.
Okay, well, I can't then hire or maybe keep certain people, right? So then there is a real person that gets harmed, right?
Right.
So I don't know. To me, it's kind of like the argument for why everyone shouldn't litter. It's like, well, we all shouldn't, because if we all did, life would be really bad. And so if we all shoplifted, it'd be pretty bad too. But I get it. We're talking about like taking little snippings of plants. It's not as wild as I'm saying here.
Yeah, but no, I really appreciate the following the thread through, because that's part of what I was really enjoying about talking to Ryan was just hearing the thought process roll out. One thing he also mentioned was he found it to be chaotic good.
Hmm.
I know have a little bit of a gaming background, so like the grid we're talking about is the Dungeons and Dragons sort of alignment grid, where it's like lawful and then good to evil and unlawful. Just talking through like in his mind, this had kind of like Robin Hood vibes, where it's
Yeah.
like you're saving a plant or,
I would agree.
uh,
I would agree.
yeah,
I mean, I think that taking stuff off the ground or rescuing plants. There's also people who will like go into a big box store and they'll find like the crappiest looking plants,
yeah,
and they'll say like, "Hey, can I just get like 50% off of these? You can't sell them anyways," and or they'll ask them for them for free, and the store usually says yes, and then they save those. That's almost lawful good, but
right.
the prop lifting stuff is chaotic good, and then I would say maybe the like scissors based propagation cuttings is maybe chaotic neutral or something like that. It's just
Yeah,
getting a little bit over on the other side, but none of these I would say is some insane thing. We're not walking in like stealing fire pits.
right. So Ryan's friendly advice was corporations deserve nothing. I think it's justified. If you want to steal a little, go out and steal a little. So I ask Kevin, is this advice we should be following?
Yeah, I mean, no, obviously not. I haven't. I think the last thing I ever stole was in college, and I took some Scantrons from like the student store because I needed them for the test, and I needed them like fast, and they were 10 cents, and theoretically that is still a theft, right?
Yeah.
But my logic there is like I am paying 100 grand for tuition. I feel like the Scantron should have been free. Like just hand those out at the actual test. But and then before that, man, I was a kid. I went into a Big Five. Remember that sporting goods
Yep.
store? Went into a Big Five. I mean, it still exists, but I went in and I had these big nerdy glasses. I wear contacts now, and I put on those like frog sort of
Yes.
little thingies, and I wore it out, and I didn't realize it. And
Uh-huh.
so when my dad found out, he like made me drive back and like
Yep.
just give him. And so I felt pretty bad about that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
You really beat me to that question. I was gonna sort of put the screws to you and find out if you had stolen anything. But I would ask you, do you think that taking the sugar from the coffee place is stealing?
I get your logic more than I understood his, because you're kind of right. Like if you go into the coffee shop and you buy a latte
Yep.
and you don't apply the sugar
Yep.
to the latte you bought, then technically that isn't in the spirit of why they offered it. You know what I mean? And so I guess you could make an argument that you are hybrid stealing there, like kind of stealing. I wouldn't call it like an outright, and I don't think anyone would actually care. And I do think it almost even matters how many sugars you take,
Sure.
right? If you pop one in the purse, who cares?
Right.
If you start hoarding that whole pile, then I'm like, even if you did buy the sugar, like that's too much.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I did not, I wasn't sure if I was going to be raked over the coals on that one, but thank you for that. I felt like I needed that.
Yeah, yeah. You are absolved.
No, well, actually, I'm not even sure I am. I feel
Yeah.
to your point, I mean, I think I took like 3 sugars, but still,
Oh,
yeah, like
yeah.
it,
You're
it
done for
didn't
then. Canceled.
canceled. Yep. So the confessor said, I can't believe I'm telling you this, but in the pandemic, I started buying houseplants because I was so depressed. And a few months later, I kept them all alive. I'm a superstar. I love that this person discovered the joy of plants.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I would love to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts on that because I feel like you just seem like the biggest example of someone who discovered the joy of plants.
Yeah. I mean, I think I got into it with vegetables instead of houseplants. A lot of people, the pandemic was big for houseplants, but honestly, even before that, like 2016, 17, 18 was houseplant fever. Everyone was getting into them. I think you were probably sometime around then too, right?
Sure. Yeah. I feel like I also started, vegetables are like the gateway drug.
Mm.
Like back in 2011, put in my first veggie garden and had a really very successful first year. And then the year after, I made the cardinal mistake of tripling down and I put in
Mm.
17 types of tomatoes.
Oh
And
my God. Wow.
I just got excited. Like, I
That's
don't
a
know,
lot,
tomato
honestly.
fever, it's like something, I don't know what happens to us, but I learned a very important lesson. Never grow green tomatoes because you can never find your damn tomato.
Yeah, you won't know if it's ripe
I had
either.
no
I've
idea.
stopped as well. There's a couple that I've grown, like green zebra. To me, I actually have stopped growing most colored tomatoes in general. Just red for me these days.
Interesting. Not even like a
Yeah.
Japanese, like a black tomato or purple.
I mean, I've done them all. I've probably grown 50 maybe varieties of tomatoes in my life, but maybe a little more. And I went through like a season of life, I guess, where I wanted to grow the weirdest ones I could. So
Same.
Brad's atomic grape and
Yes.
chocolate cherry and these sorts of
Yep.
ones. And what I've discovered, at least for me, is how do I like to use my tomatoes? I want like a big sandwich slicer,
Yep.
which I want flavor. I want a cherry, which I want like off the vine flavor.
Yep.
I want maybe like the sandwich or salad style, like smaller guys flavor. And then I want a sauce tomato, which you really don't grow different colors than red for that. You have
Right.
these Roma or San Marzano style. And so they all converge to like the red hybridized varieties or classic heirloom varieties that just tend to be what tomatoes look like, do really well. They just do really well, and the flavor is really nice, at least for me. And so
Yep.
that's why I've ended up with red for most of them these days.
What's your slicer?
My slicer right now, I have one called Beauty King that's in the
Okay.
ground, which is actually not fully red, to be fair. It's kind of like a red yellow striated
Oh,
tomato,
cool.
but a very pretty tomato, but it doesn't sacrifice flavor for beauty, which most of these tend to. The ones that look weird,
Yes.
they're I'm like, well, I can't put you up against a Cherokee purple,
Right.
or I can't put you up against a classic sort of beefsteak. So but I don't just want to look at you, right? So I want to eat
Right.
you.
Right.
So yeah,
What's the point?
it's a tricky little game.
I love I love the way that gardening makes you feel connected to the world. I personally feel like standing barefoot in my backyard, wandering around, pulling weeds and just, I don't know, talking to my plants inside and outside,
Yeah,
frankly. It's just very satisfying.
it is. Yeah, it is. I don't talk to them at all, actually. I don't like anthropomorphize my plants. I never
What?
have.
Come
I
on.
get why people do. I'm not trying to trash talk that at all. Trust me. I get why people do. It's just not been the way I've connected to it. But for me, you're totally right. Like when I walk outside barefoot, usually, and just kind of vibe out in the garden, wander around, I'm stepping on the soil, I'm harvesting this, I'm harvesting that. I just feel very at peace. I feel very connected. I feel very peaceful and sort of content, which is hard to come by, I think, in the world of the digital, which is where our business actually operates, so to speak.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's a good reset for me that happens like every single day.
Yeah, I could tell that our caller had felt it too because, like it's that when you keep something alive, you get that instinct that you want to like double and triple and then like, a whole room full of it. If one plant makes me feel good, a whole jungle is going to make me feel amazing.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I mean, I think what a lot of people do is they'll get into something in year one, like let's say the tomatoes that you did, and then they'll do exactly what you did, where they're like, "Holy shit, I really like these tomatoes. I'm doing 17," and
Yep.
then a lot of the times, what happens is that second season gets overwhelming because it's just way more than they were used to, and then the third season, if there is one, they tend to kind of find some sort of middle ground and streamline things a little bit. But there's nothing wrong with just going crazy in your second season. It's part of the fun of it.
That was me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking about our caller too, and I really appreciated the definition of prop lifting.
Yeah.
Can you explain propagating for us and just, this process that our guy has discovered of, how to make a plant out of something, previously pieces.
Yeah, pieces of a plant. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the plant, right? So, like you mentioned, succulents are pretty easy to do this with because they are succulent. The leaves have a lot of inherent like moisture and water in them. And so when one falls off of, let's just say, an aeonium style cactus or something like that, you'll just get this little nubbin of a leaf, right? And what you'll do is you just kind of place that face down, make sure that that little cut point has some attachment to like a cactus mix or soil, and you can kind of just mist it for a few weeks, and you'll start to see these little root hairs pop out, and then you'll stick those in the soil, and they'll start to go. Because all plants, not all, but many plants have a way besides producing seeds that they can continue their life if they have to. So when you look at basil, let's say, because that's a really popular herb that people want to propagate, of course, you could grow basil, you could get the flowers, they could get pollinated, and then those flowers could produce seeds. You could collect those seeds and then grow that out, and it takes like a year. Or you could just clip basil, and you'll notice on a stem, there'll be nodes, which is where like new growth comes out. So you'll see leaves coming out, right? And usually with basil, it's like a stem, and then a set of leaves on the left and the right, a stem, set of leaves on the left and the right.
Yep.
And what you'll do is you'll cut right below that emanation point where those leaves are coming out, rip those leaves off and stick that in water. And the plant knows, oh, wow, I've been separated basically from my mother and my father, right? And so I need to develop my own way to survive, and it'll produce roots. And once it does produce those roots, congrats, you basically have a new basil plant, right? And you can then put that in soil and it'll propagate itself. And that's basically what this sounds like what this person was doing with the succulents. And then they got into like branches, which that's actually like an entirely different type of propagation. If it was like a
Right.
really thick branch, that's a totally different thing. But I suspect they probably are like snipping little pieces of herbs off and trying to propagate those.
Yeah. So as you said, prop lifting is a combination of propagating and shoplifting.
Hmm.
One of the things I found so interesting about this was, I went to Reddit and poked around. I love Reddit. I can't help it. But there's a whole community talking about prop lifting. And I want to just say for the record, there are 237,000 people in this subreddit for prop lifting. And I'm just flabbergasted by this number. Does that surprise you?
I guess 230,000 does surprise me a bit, but it doesn't surprise me that that would be the case, I guess, on Reddit, because I don't know. For some reason, I would associate Reddit with people more likely to think like that it's not harming anyone and F the
Like looking for
corporations,
a
you know.
workaround to
I,
something.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out. Yeah,
Oh, that's fascinating.
238,000.
So
Wow.
they actually define it. Sometimes on the right-hand side of Reddit, there's a little rules for the community. And on the side, they actually said, must acquire props and pups that have already fallen and are in no way physically attached to the plant.
Yeah, that's exactly what we got to, right, on our own, is if it's already detached, then it's a sunk cost, I guess, right? There's
Yep.
nothing that's going to happen to it. But yeah, if you come in with the scissors, then you're going back to just normal shoplifting.
Yep. I don't know. For me, I always think of the garden community as moral. I'm not sure if maybe that's just me being naive, but in my brain, I have this sort of connection with like gardening and Mother Earth and whatever. Like my brain says garden community feels moral. But I mean, obviously, there's certainly been some real drama. You sort of alluded to this earlier. In the last, after 2015, I would say there was just a massive amount of people out
Mm.
there digging plants up in the wild, people sort of stealing things from stores, which really surprised me. Um, Although maybe it shouldn't. I don't know. What do you think?
I guess I would be surprised that that community, the gardening community, would just like sort of actively steal stuff. That would be surprising to me because I think if you've taken the time to grow a plant out, like let's say like a fancy houseplant, right? Monstera, Thai Constellation, or Pink Princess. These are some famous houseplants that were very hot for some period of time.
Yep.
Those ones, you'd be doing like legit real damage to a local nursery if you went through and stole via actually cutting it off of the plant. A pink princess or a Thai constellation at that point when they were like super hot, because those plants could go for hundreds of dollars. And so it would be weird to me, and especially if you've like taken the time to grow a house plant out or a veggie out, and you know the time it kind of takes and the care to get a plant to the level where you need it to be. To imagine someone coming by and just chopping, you're like, well, it's the golden rule. Like I wouldn't want someone doing that to my garden, so I wouldn't do it to theirs. I would ask, and the funny part is, you're right. Like the gardening community is super friendly. So if you even you knock on someone's door, hey, I really love this passion fruit. Like, do you mind if I just take a quick cutting? Passion fruit's like a huge vine. It goes all over the place. Harms not even them if you took one. 99 times out of 100, they're, oh, of course, like take as many as you want. Like, do you want these too? You know, you'll get that type of behavior. So why would you not ask?
Yeah. I don't know. That really surprised me. I also sort of had this like thought process around sort of foraging or people who are out in the wild, like foraging in my brain, and maybe I'm defining this wrong. Foraging, you're finding something in the wild that you can eat yourself, or like, you know, you're or bringing something home that you have a real use for. Is would you say that's the right definition for foraging?
Foraging is an interesting one because it's a pretty big community around the world, and there's like a lot of different things you can forage, and some things are effectively forageable and also invasive. Like I don't have a good example at the top of my head, but imagine like something that isn't even supposed to be where it is,
Yep.
and yet you can eat it. So in that case, if it's like damaging the local ecology, then oftentimes there's no limit ethically on what you should take. Like a good example might be in the animal world where like deer perhaps are running rampant in a particular area, so they like remove the hunting restriction limits on it because they
Yep.
actually need to cut the population down. That can happen in the plant world too. And then there's stuff that it's very easy to damage or completely remove from a particular ecosystem. So, like, if you think about ramps, are you familiar with ramps?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like a wild garlic, right? And it's a delicacy. Chefs love it. Home cooks love it. Very hard to cultivate in an actual garden, though.
Hmm.
And what people will do is if you find a ramp spot, generally speaking, like good rule of thumb is you never take more than a third of what you see, if that. But sometimes, people are like, oh my God, it's my first one, or they don't know, and they'll just clear the whole thing out. And that means that now no one can ever get ramps from that spot for many, many, many years to come until maybe it
Wow.
spreads back into that area, right? And so foraging is a tricky one where technically there's no like lifting component to it because you're in hopefully on public land, just taking what's there. It's not protected. So you
Right.
can, in theory, you could do anything you wanted, and it kind of just gets into the ethics at that point.
Yeah. Like what's wild isn't always yours.
Yeah, what's wild is the way to think about it is what's wild is all of ours, and so let it be for all of us in the future, and don't just clear it out.
Yeah. I feel like I agree. I think, if you're out there taking plants from a store, it's different than if you're physically taking scissors to a store, you have stolen something. And I come back myself to the fact that this person went to the store with scissors.
Yeah, it's the intent. I mean, think of the intent there,
Yeah.
right? Like this now feels like someone who during the pandemic kind of had like a thing that they could blow some steam off with, and they were connected. And again, I'm not trying to say this is like some evil person or anything like
Sure.
that, but like it's the sort of weird intentionality behind bringing the scissors to me that's just so
Yeah.
bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I dug quite a bit through that Reddit forum. And I would say the majority of people in that forum sound just like Ryan, where they're like, it's a
Yeah.
corporation. Some of the things they were really talking about were like big box stores just sweep anything on the ground into the trash. So, you're rescuing something. You kind of mentioned that as well.
In that sense, yes. I
Yeah.
think like are they saying though that like you can just run in and like clip something and that's also fine?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I felt like the forum had, especially in the comments, like a very wide range of
Yeah.
sense of morality about all of it.
Because like if you think about that though, like set aside the stuff that's on the ground, right? We've already kind of seems like we all agree it might technically still not be legal. I don't actually even know, but from a practical perspective, like nothing's going to happen to those things. They are going to get thrown away.
Yeah.
Probably not even composted. They're probably just going to get thrown away.
Right.
But if you say it's okay then to come into let's say a Home Depot and snip off a piece of a tomato that's growing, right? And
Yep.
for sale and then trying to propagate that. And if you're saying that's fine, well then why wouldn't you then also be fine with just taking the whole pot? What's the
Right.
difference then? And I don't think anyone's going to say they might still do it or they might still like advocate for it, I guess. But at that point, you're just actually advocating to steal, and
Right.
then you have to just admit that's what you're doing. You have to say, "Yeah, I love to steal," and just own that.
Right. Right. And at that point, popping up in that forum and talking about it and showing off the plant you grew, like, are you sort of creating fostering an environment where it's people feel like it's more okay to do that? And then are you kind of helping to perpetuate that by,
Yeah,
you
probably.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of the folks, I don't know people who do this like personally, I guess, or if I do, they haven't told me about it. But I would imagine a lot of the people that are into this, maybe they don't have a lot of other things kind of going on. Maybe they can't afford these plants, or it could be some sort of little release valve, some little vice that they've got. Because I'd be shocked if any of these people were like literally running in doing this on a regular basis, you know?
yeah. Yeah. I thought that was interesting. And really thought about the note from the confessor that said it's literally Walmart. It feels more moral to take something from them because they're making a killing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's I mean that I get that argument in a but it does to me feel kind of like a before you learn how the world works type of argument. It feels sort of like a angsty 17-year-olds you know, argument. It's just me because we are all of us are supporting the sort of system that we are all in. We're all part of society. The people, like corporations without people don't exist, right? Like
Right.
I know legally they're considered people, but you know what I mean? Like that what's
Yep.
actually moving the machine is all of us.
Right.
And then like when is it okay then to steal, right? Can you steal from Epic Gardening right now?
Right.
Maybe you say no because you feel like you know who I am or something like that. But I don't know if we got 3 times bigger, is it now okay? You know what I mean? Like I do feel like some of these things you kind of just have to be like, nah, I don't think we should do it in general. The world's going to be better off. But I can't say I don't like understand the point of view.
Yeah. Yep. I did a little bit of digging too, and I came across the idea that Home Depot and Lowe's and a lot of these big box stores actually all destroy any plants that are returned to the store. Have you ever heard that?
You know, I don't know for a fact, so I don't want to say, yeah, that's what happens, but it really, I can see the argument for it because let's imagine I go out and buy a tomato, right? And then I try growing it, and for some reason or another, it doesn't work. Let's say it has anthracnose, which is a bacterial disease or fungal disease, and then I return it. Well, then I really, as Home Depot or any nursery, mom and pop, all the way on up, I'm not going to introduce an unknown quantity in back into my tomato area because actually it will wipe out the rest of the tomatoes, and they can't know for sure
Sure.
if it has like some spores or maybe aphids or this or that. And so in one way, it's one of those things where it's like the individual instance feels kind of bad. It feels kind of icky to like throw away a plant. But if the result is 10% of the time all the plants in that section get destroyed by a fungal disease, then it's better on the net to throw away the one, right?
Yep.
So it's tricky, and you would hope like they would compost it out, or there's some sort of way that they would be returning that to the earth. I don't know if they do or not, honestly. Sometimes the scale of these companies is so big they can't do it. Uh,
Yep.
but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a reputation thing too, right? Like your Lowe's, you have a great plant section and somebody brings back, something that looks okay. If you did put it back on the shelf, maybe it wasn't watered the same way or had,
Hmm.
crappy conditions wherever it ended up and somebody else takes it home and it dies right away. Well, now you think that Lowe's has crappy plants. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I imagine there's like a reputation component there too.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, just like product consistency, you know?
But if you're back to that chaotic good person, they're probably just like, wait a minute, you're going to throw that away? I imagine that's
Yeah.
like
What they
a,
could do is they should have like a returns section that's like quarantined off somewhere,
yeah,
and you can just go take that stuff for free instead of throwing it away.
yeah, I like that idea. I also read that they often return damaged plants to the vendor for a refund. So breaking or damaging a plant in the store might actually affect a smaller vendor who is selling their stuff.
Oh yeah. That I know very well because I know people personally who own and operate what are called production nurseries. So I know people who grow somewhere in the tune of like 50 to 80 million plants a year.
Wow.
They're large businesses on like a revenue basis, but they're family owned operations that really have like 20 people and a seasonal labor force working there, you know?
Yep.
And so you have to think like Home Depot or Lowe's or these big, they're not growing those plants. They're reselling plants that other people are growing, right? And it's often from hundreds of different suppliers. And so you're completely right. Like they have their hooks on these vendors pretty hard sometimes too. So
Yep.
like the the sellback rules or the terms or this or that. If you do that too much, it eventually just goes downstream to the suppliers, and most of those are not some sort of faceless megacorp type person. Like the one I know of is a third generation Japanese family. Like they're just trying to make a living. And so, yeah, you got to think about a little deeper than just like X is bad, therefore I can
Right.
do anything, right?
Yeah. Yep. The confessor also said, I love the look of plants everywhere. They're so relaxing, but plants are so expensive and I want them everywhere. I personally have over 100 plants in my house. I had to count because I had no idea how many. Green is my favorite color. I feel disconnected if I don't have nature around me. But frankly, nobody's forcing you to have an expensive hobby, right?
Hmm.
Nobody's forcing
Hmm.
this guy. Like, clearly he wants plants everywhere, but, you know, I feel like there's got to be a lot of other ways to get your hands on plants that are a little more maybe ethically solid. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some general thoughts on how somebody who's obsessed with plants just fell in love. Like, how can they get their hands on more plants if they can't afford to just go splurge?
Man, the easiest way is just ask around. I mean, if you have a plant community around you, or there's like local groups or swaps that you can go to, that's really where you can make a lot of progress in this whole propping or prop lifting, let's call it. But it's not prop lifting if you go to one of these, right? So you can go to a place and just like trade cuttings with a bunch of different people, or you could even do it online, and you could get some really wild varieties that people will ship you. Actually, someone recently sent me about 20 different types of aroids, one of which was the Philodendron Espiritu Sancti, which is a relatively rare aroid, which has my sort of name in it. So I was like, oh, I want that one. And so she sent me like 20 of these, and I've been growing them out. And she just sent them for free. She's like, yeah, I have a lot. I've been propagating them. Here you go. And voila, I now have 20 plants. That's
How
a
cool is
fifth of the
that?
ones that you said that you have, Lori. So you
Yeah.
can you can massively increase the amount of plants you have with not a lot of money without rolling through Home Depot and committing some crimes.
Yep. So a plant swap. I know there's actually some Facebook groups that are sort of really into this. I'm in LA, you're in
Hmm.
San Diego. There's definitely a huge growing community in both of our cities, but I kind of feel like there's a pretty solid growing community most places.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I mean, the Facebook groups are huge here. There's so many of these like plant swap, Chicago, plant swap, Lower East Side, New York, or whatever, that you can find.
Yeah, starting something from seeds. I mean, as a seed guy,
Hmm.
like it takes a lot longer for certain things, but there's just 100 different ways that you can really get your hands on something that can grow and take care of yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're trying to get crazy with it, you can go to the library, and the library sometimes will just have free seeds that you can get and just grow from that. Like gardening doesn't have to be expensive. It can be. Like the thing that I think is interesting, Lori, is like a lot of people, you see this discourse of like, oh, like everyone's spending too much on their gardens. Like you don't have to have this, you don't have to have that. It's like, cool. Well, you also don't have to rock climb ever. You don't ever have to rock climb, but people do it because they want to, and then they like to spend on the shoe and the chalk bag and the this and the that. It's like if it's truly your hobby and passion, I say spend as much as you want on something that beneficial for yourself and for the planet. It's totally fine. But if you really don't want to, and you want to just like try to do this on the cheap, you could start a garden for zero, utilizing like found materials in the soil in your backyard and maybe some seeds that you pick up from the library.
I love that. I would never have guessed about the library.
Hmm.
Also, I feel like your neighbors can be a great resource. Just walk down the road and see who has an amazing garden. And I feel like if you leave a little note in the mailbox or knock on somebody's door, catch them, out watering something, telling somebody that you love their landscaping or their plants is on like a surefire way to get somebody to offer you, clippings or tomatoes or, oranges from the tree.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with gardeners is like you're never gonna find us not wanting to talk about it. And so if you know someone is a grower and you want to get to know them and try to connect and maybe get a couple plants, just ask them about their garden because they won't shut up after that.
Yeah. One thing that I came across when I was doing research was about someone in particular, and it was the story of Bill Wilson, who is the founding father and the author of Alcoholics Anonymous. He had a Swedish ivy plant that was in the hospital with him when he died. And somehow this became extremely meaningful to this community. And this plant has been propagated and passed around the world. And somehow this little ivy plant has people share it in the memory of this guy who, created this community and this program. And it became a gift that people give each other for sobriety stuff, like you've hit a certain number of years or meetings or whatever. The Bill W plant, Bill Wilson's plant, has been sent around the world. People get it from their sponsor. I just thought this was so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool because when you propagate, you get a true genetic clone of a plant. So, you have a particular basil, you propagate it, it's the exact same basil genetically speaking. And so there's a cool kind of story you could tell with the Bill W plant. It's the exact one that he started, right? And so there is a through line there that is deeper than just like sort of the metaphor. It's literally the same plant being propagated around the world, which is really cool.
That seems very special too. I feel like, as a tight community, it kind of connects you. People are mailing these plants across the world to each other. People are asking who's been propagating it, and it becomes like such a special thing. I don't know. I just thought that was like one of the most interesting propagating stories I ever heard.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Kevin, can you tell me any houseplants that you think if somebody wanted to get started, if you are going to buy one, but then you want to sort of be propagating in your own home, like what would you suggest people start with?
Easiest, it's so boring to say because I feel like everyone's probably heard of it by now, but easiest is either the ZZ plant, it's called Zamioculcas zamifolia, or the snake plant. There's a bunch of different colors and varieties there. Or if you want something more traditional, more leafy, you just get some variant of a pothos plant. There's like 8 or 10 different varieties there. They're all super easy. Doesn't necessarily mean they're like stunning because you've been seeing them all over the place over the last like 10 years. But like with pothos, if you really want to get wild, you could climb it up a tree or you could like put it up the side of your house. I went to this woman's house who's super into houseplants, Homestead, Brooklyn. Summer Rain Oaks is her name. Went to her place and she has a pothos in a tiny little pot that's running 100 feet this way in her house and 100 feet the other way.
Wow.
And so like there's cool stuff you can do with basic plants.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I definitely am a snake plant propagator just because I have them and I have the perfect southern facing window that it seems like a responsibility to continue to propagate them.
Yeah.
They just keep putting out little babies. So
It's
like,
so, and they're so easy, right? Like over
Yeah.
time, it just boop, 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 keeps
you
coming.
ignore it for like a month and come back and there's another one.
You got a new one. Yeah.
Okay, so our confessor called in because he was looking for some validation that his hobby of taking branches and clippings, trying to grow his plant collection, was okay. At the heart of his confession, it really sounded to me like he was a little uncomfortable about the way his partner viewed his actions. And he said, "Please tell me you get it." Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
If you were going to say one thing to this guy, Kevin, what's your one piece of advice to our friend?
I would say if you have to ask, you probably should stop doing it. I'd say put the scissors away and just go back to that basic, off the ground propping, or I don't know, just get involved in like the plant community and start. Because the thing is, like the stuff at the big box, Lowe's, Home Depot, it's not even that rare or that special most of the time. If that's your thing, like if you're really trying to get some wild, crazy varieties, you got to go to a club of some kind or like a swap or something, anyways. And so you might as well do that. Like here in San Diego, have you ever been down to the like Native Plant Society or the Succulent Society's events?
Nope.
They'll have these events, and the craziest stuff you could ever imagine is there for like $15
Wow.
or $20, which is probably how much that normal stuff costs at big box, right?
Yep.
And so you can go to those and actually spend a little cash, and guess what? Those are all plant people. So if you really didn't want to, I'm sure they'd give you something,
Yep.
and you could get some really crazy varieties. But to the caller, I would say like maybe leave the scissors at home.
Kevin, I want to know, do you have a true home confession yourself? Anything that you want to sort of get off your chest or anything going on at your house?
Oh man, I mean, true home confession is don't get a house with a bathroom that the toilet is actually in a little cubby hole area that is it's like barely bigger than your own butt. And so like when I sit in the toilet, I can't, like I feel like I'm in a prison. And so maybe consider that you actually do use the toilet a lot, and like your quality of life is important. And I'm a pretty big guy. And so when I sit in there, I'm like, just get me out of here. And so the next home I get, because I can't really even remodel this one to fix that problem, because I'd delete an entire closet. And it's a very small home. So my next home, my bathroom is going to be insane. It's gonna be like a his, hers, double toilet, big toilet, whatever, just to like counteract this trauma. But no, a lot of learnings from this first home that I've purchased and done some work on.
And just to confirm, there's only one bathroom in the house?
2 bed, 1 bath, 1,000 square feet. Yeah.
Wow.
Small house. Big lot, small house.
Yeah. We got priorities.
Yeah. I'm trying to grow.
Ryan says it's okay to steal a little from corporations. Kevin says put the scissors away. To our confessor, if you ask me, I think there's tons of ways to surround yourself with plants without having to resort to behavior that makes you or your partner feel uncomfortable. Leave a note in a neighbor's mailbox. Make a new friend. Meeting more people who will nerd out with you on your plant babies is definitely a good thing. I think, I just leave the scissors at home. I want to thank everybody for listening, for all the ways you can find Ryan Barton and Kevin Espiritu, as well as way more information on everything we talked about. Hit the notes. If you laughed, rolled your eyes, or took notes, please consider sharing this with a friend. The only way that we can grow is with your help. Thanks for spending time with me. Hit subscribe and let's do it again.